Pleasure Beach Resort, or as it's more commonly known, Blackpool Pleasure Beach, is an amusement park dating way back to 1896. Located in northwest England, this old-school classic is host to many records, including the largest collection of wooden roller coasters in the UK at 4. They were also responsible for building the world's tallest roller coaster back in 1994, and the first fully inverting steel coaster in Europe back in 1979. Further claims to fame include the last remaining Steeplechase roller coaster, one of only 5 Mobius racing coasters still operating, and the most interactive coaster ever built. All that and more to come as we rank every single roller coaster at Blackpool Pleasure Beach from worst to best. But first, I'd like to highlight some other gems I got to experience that won't be qualifying for my list today. Valhalla was one of the largest and most expensive indoor rides in the world when it opened in the year 2000, costing £15 million. All it took was one ride on the soaking water attraction before I was hooked, and I firmly believe it's the park's best amusement ride to this day. Blackpool's Ghost Train was the first of its kind ever built when it opened in 1930, and in my opinion, it is by far the best one at a major amusement park. Some might argue this could be a roller coaster since it does have one gravity-dependent drop, which is another reason I wanted to mention it here. One more I absolutely loved was their classic Alice in Wonderland dark ride from 1962. When I discovered this during my visit, I was shocked they had the licensing to operate it until I learned about a popular story in which Walt Disney personally gave the park permission since he had earlier visited while researching to build Disneyland. This place is just packed with history, and I suggest you take the time to explore its ins and outs rather than just focusing on its roller coasters. Having said that, let's dive into our list. With easily my least favorite coaster in the park, number 10 is Steeplechase, an aerodynamic steeplechase coaster opened in 1977. As previously stated, this is the only ride of its kind left operating and one of just 2 ever built, with the other being the legendary Wacky Soapbox Racers from my home park, Knott's Berry Farm. Therefore, I was quite intrigued by this attraction, however I remember doing it once and saying that was terrible out loud. Even worse is because there's 3 separate tracks adding up to 3 roller coaster credits, I had to do it 2 additional times to boost my count. While I'm on the topic, I'll give Steeplechase credit where credit is due. The interaction with other riders is great, but I found it challenging to enjoy when I was being tossed around these horribly uncomfortable restraints due to the track profiling being too jarring and sudden. But regardless of how I feel about it, I do consider it an impressive feat that Blackpool's been able to maintain all 3 tracks for close to 5 decades. Number 9, Blue Flyer, a Philadelphia Toboggan Company wooden coaster opened in 1934. Formerly known as the Zipper Dipper, this is the smallest of the 4 woodies in the park by far. As a matter of fact, Blue Flyer stands just 15 feet tall and spans 1,000 feet of track length. It is a tiny coaster, but in a way, I like it even more for that. How often do you see a wooden roller coaster built for kids? Because I've only come across that a couple of times. I can also appreciate that they don't restrict adults from experiencing Blue Flyer, as it not only can make it hard for us to add it to our coaster count, but for some teens and adults, this might be right up your alley. I don't judge. Ultimately, since it offers almost nothing in forces, it doesn't cater to my audience, I can't rank it any higher than 9, but Blue Flyer is a relatively interesting coaster in my opinion. Number 8, Infusion, a Vekoma suspended looping coaster, opened in 2007. If you ask just about any roller coaster enthusiast what they think of this style of ride, they'll tell you SLCs are the worst thing in the world. And while I generally agree, these do have solid layouts. So much so that a smooth SLC can actually be a pretty good ride. Unfortunately, Infusion isn't smooth by any means, but it does pack in thrilling elements and high positive G-forces, which is why I can't in good conscience put Blue Flyer above it. At the end of the day, this isn't a coaster I'd ever go out of my way to re-ride, but who knows, maybe there's some people out there who do enjoy it. But personally, I'd hope this is the next big thing to be removed so that they can replace it with something better. Number 7, Big Dipper, a Philadelphia Toboggan Company wooden coaster, opened in 1923. Rides like this fascinate me so much because how exactly do you manage to maintain something more than a century old? When Big Dipper was built, it cost a grand total of £25,000, which is absolutely unbelievable. It's a decently impressive coaster in stature too, at 60 feet tall and 3,300 feet in track length. Now of course, I'm not going in with the highest of expectations, and I'd say that is what allowed me to better enjoy this ride. It crawled over most every hill and around each turnaround, but like, you've got to cut rides like this some slack. Who cares if it's not chucking you out of your seat like modern coasters? The fact that it's rideable at all is a miracle in my opinion. That said, when I compare this to the other 2 woodies we have left, Big Dipper does fall behind. Number 6, Avalanche, a Mock Rides bobsled coaster, opened in 1988. This fascinating ride model is few and far between these days, with just 5 in existence and sister variants from manufacturer Intamin on the chopping block. Well, I've been fortunate to experience all 5 mock bobsleds, and a defunct Intamin version, and an in-house built wood bobsled coaster, and of them all, Avalanche is one of the best. While not the longest, at just 1,400 feet in length, Avalanche keeps an excellent pace through its layout, and due to how wide the trough is, it can be hard to tell what's coming next relative to most roller coasters. I particularly love the end section where you're traveling so fast that the quick directional shifts result in little airtime pops. I'm grateful I got to complete this coaster model, especially especially with rumors surrounding the closure of Avalanche to make way for future investment. While it wouldn't be the end of the world to see this close, especially in a park with other, even better classics, I still would miss it. This is a very fun ride. Number 5, Nickelodeon Streak, a Charles Page wooden coaster opened in 1933. Known as just roller coaster until 2010 when it was integrated into the park's Nickelodeon area, this incredibly old woody has quite the peculiar appearance. For starters, it's rare that you see a wooden coaster that isn't brown, but also too, I'm surprised they'd consider a ride like this adequate to be in a kid's area. Granted, it's not particularly intense, but in terms of size and scope, this is about as large as the Big Dipper, even reaching a greater max height. Leaning into the ride experience, this is also similar to Big Dipper in that it doesn't offer too many forces, but the drops and dips are relatively zippy and fun for a family coaster. This is also a decent bit smoother, providing a more comfortable ride experience than some modern wooden roller coasters. So all in all, while Nickelodeon Streak isn't anything crazy and dare I say a little obsolete in the park's lineup, I still enjoyed it a lot for what it was. Number 4, Revolution, an aerodynamic shuttle loop coaster opened in 1979. This once popular ride model is a rarity nowadays, with just 3 left in existence and the other 2 seeming to be on borrowed time. I am fully confident that Revolution will outlive all of them and will carry on the legacy of this ride type, which is great because it's also my favorite of these I've been on. While they're more or less the same as one another, Revolution has shorter trains than the others, which results in a zippier, smoother ride experience. It's a simple concept, boosting riders off one platform to get them to another with a loop sandwiched in the middle. Rinse and repeat, but this time you're going backwards, and that second pass is awesome. The loop is forceful, the drops are packed with airtime. This is a great example of a coaster you don't want to judge by its cover. Number 3, Grand National, a Charles Page wooden coaster opened in 1935. If you can believe it, this is the newest of the park's wooden roller coasters, despite the fact that it's 90 years old. Isn't that something? This is also one of the last remaining Mobius loop coasters in operation, which is a type of dueling coaster where both tracks are connected into one long circuit. In other words, whichever side you board, you'll be getting off on the other side. In terms of the ride experience, I'd heard mixed things about Grand National, with critics usually stating that it's a rough and unpleasant coaster. But honestly, I didn't really agree. For its age, I think it runs totally fine, and where I experienced it in the back car, there were some violent, messed up airtime moments. That, combined with the interaction you get from riders aboard the other train, made this the best and most memorable wooden roller coaster in Blackpool's lineup. Number 2, Big One, an aerodynamics hypercoaster opened in 1994. When this opened, Pleasure Beach was really pushing the height envelope alongside several other parks in competition for the record. 5 years previously, Magnum XL 200 became the world's first hypercoaster at Cedar Point, but fun fact, that drop only spans 194 feet. You did also have Steel Phantom make its way up to Kennywood 2 years later, with the drop considerably larger, but due to the heavy terrain usage, technically the coaster was only 160 feet high. Big One was the first of this model to be greater than 200 feet tall and have a drop which surpassed 200 feet, meaning it was indisputably a hypercoaster. Now, despite its unbelievable stature, many will criticize this ride for its meandery layout consisting of poorly profiled hills and bank turns, and while I certainly understand where these people are coming from, Big One is a guilty pleasure of mine. This is one of the most hilarious roller coasters I've ever experienced, and a big part of that is because of how it beats you up at such fast speeds and such gargantuan heights. It feels like a workout from drop to brakes, and the only other coaster I can really say that about is Voyage at Holiday World. A big part of that is because Big One's length is 5,400 feet of track, which still makes it the longest roller coaster in the UK to this day. You feel like you're on an adventure with this one, like my only focus while riding was trying to survive. But even with its glaring imperfections, I can safely say this is some of the most fun I've ever had on a coaster. I was honestly tempted to place it at number 1. But objectively, this can't actually touch Icon, a Mock Rides launch coaster opened in 2018. This is the one ultra-modern roller coaster in a park filled with exactly the opposite. In that way, it's very, very cool, especially as you pass by tons of pre-existing attractions they had to work around. Something many don't seem to realize is that Icon is the most interactive roller coaster ever built, since it does pass within close proximity of all of these rides and attractions. And aside from being a cool fun fact, it actually does add to the ride experience, since it not only delivers the occasional near-miss element, but it also makes it harder to know where you're heading next. Despite these things, I'll keep it real. I was a bit disappointed by my first few rides on Icon. I just didn't find it all too intense, even though I figured it would be designed to thrill. Here's the catch though, a few years ago, Pleasure Beach introduced Enzo, a spinning back car which you could experience on the back row of Icon. So not only are you getting the whip and pull of the ride's already best seats, you're also rotating through the entire layout. What I'd recommend is an off-balance ride on Enzo where you ride solo, since the ride vehicles spin much faster and dials up the intensity to 11. The POV you're seeing now is a normal, balanced ride on Enzo. Still amazing for sure, but picture this with a far crazier rotation, and that's the experience I got. This was so good that I found myself comparing it to my all-time favorite coaster, Ride to Happiness, which takes advantage of its spinning vehicle tools to create a world-class coaster. Overall, Enzo became my second favorite coaster experience in the UK and almost number one, whereas Icon and Any Other Sea is quite a few spots lower. Find a middle ground and boom, you have yourself the best roller coaster at Blackpool Pleasure Beach for sure. But with that, I'd love to hear in the comments how your rankings might differ from mine if you've been to this park, or if you haven't, which are most anticipated for you. Be sure to give me a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to Coaster Dash for more content like this in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye guys.